The spiritual meaning behind Candida overgrowth. In this video, I'm gonna break down from a spiritual perspective what actually causes Candida overgrowth. Maybe you just got diagnosed with Candida overgrowth, or you've been struggling with it for a while and conventional methods and medicine is not working for you, and you're curious to learn more about the deeper reason that you may have manifested this disease. Disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional. This is not medical advice. Just spiritual perspective on how I believe that this develops from someone who's experienced it myself. So let's talk about Candida. What is Candida? Candida is a yeast and a bacteria that is actually in our gut, and it's natural. Every human has a little bit of Candida. It's a normal part of our gut microbiome makeup. So the problem with Candida is not having it. It's when it gets out of whack and imbalanced and causes an overgrowth of excess Candida in your system, also known as Candidiasis. This overgrowth of Candida is a serious beast. It is like an entity living inside of you, and it needs to be fed. Yes, that is really the main side effect you will hear about Candida, is it's really sugar addiction. And when you're feeling this like incessant craving for sugar and complex carbohydrates, and you just can't seem to get satiated and you just want to eat more and more and more, that is a sign that's not actually you that's hungry, and it's not really you're feeding, it's the Candida overgrowth. And it's like a hamster wheel where the more you keep feeding into it and feeding into it, the more it grows and grows and grows, and eventually it can get out of control, causing many other symptoms. Candida overgrowth can show up in the form of rashes on your skin, like eczema, lethargy, being super tired after you eat, not having good energy, acne. A lot of times people develop it in their tongue or on their mouth in the form of thrush, but ultimately for me, probably the biggest telltale sign of Candida is just being hungry all the time. Gluttonous, being so hungry. Now, before I get into the spiritual reasoning behind Candida, there's lots of research, evidence, and consciousness popping up these days to support this perspective that illness begins with our mind. It really is all manifested and formed from us, and depending on what emotions have not been dealt with, have been repressed, have been shoved down energetically, the body, in an effort to get you to look at those emotions and locate them, will develop dis-ease. And this is a new age perspective that a lot more people are beginning to adopt. Basically just like taking full responsibility for your illness and why your body got out of alignment, and the deeper issue typically being something that's actually emotional, not physical. So Candida, what is the emotional cause of Candida? Well, overeating is how this can really get thrown out of alignment in the first place. So let's talk about overeating. Let's talk about binging. Let's talk about sugar and candy and sweets and that dopamine hit that we all love from consuming these desserts. Typically, this addiction and this habit of overeating and overindulging and ultimately getting your subsistence through food and sugar starts in childhood. This is where these patterns and habits begin. I myself grew up in a home where it was very much about overindulging, overeating, baking, cooking, so much food. Oh my gosh, I don't know how I never got fat, but thank you, Jesus. Definitely this is how I was raised. So here's what's interesting. Candida, while it can cause all of the other symptoms I just mentioned that manifest physically on the body, you wanna know what's one of the key mental signs of having Candida? Feeling scattered and feeling all over the place. That is also a sign that you might be struggling with Candida. If you feel like you've got ADHD, you can't sit still, it's also now starting to trigger like other addictions, like now you wanna drink more, you're smoking more cigarettes, you want a coffee, you want this, you want that. Or maybe you work a job where you used to be really laser focused and now you're kind of like working on one project, and then you start another project, and then you have another idea, and then whoa. Yeah, that is definitely also the entity of Candida. So where this gets formed, it's a very interesting perspective actually, because a lot of us grow up in homes where our parents, they were not present through no fault of their own. Look, I think we're all just waking up to the reality that there is a lot of trauma out there that has not been resolved, and our parents are no exception. So if your parents had unresolved trauma, something they were running from, something they were escaping from, it could cause them to have this behavior where they're scattered. They're not present with their children in the home. They're working, they're thinking about this, they're doing that, and in turn, turn, the parent cannot attune to the child, meaning the child cannot receive the substance and the fullness from the parent that is meant to satiate the child. Does the child need food and as fuel as well? Yes, of course. But really, as human beings, much of our substance should actually come from true, pure connection with other human beings. If we grow up in a house where our parents are scattered, they're not present with us, and we don't get that connection, we will find ways to supplement and get that substance, that fullness from something else. Could be drugs, could be porn, it could be sex, it could be attention, but it can be food. And for a lot of us, that's certainly the case. So as a young child, what happens is you enter into a covenant where you energetically exchange with food, hey, I'm not getting my needs met from my parents. I'm not feeling full from my mom and dad. They're not here, they're not present, they're scattered and they're all over the place. So I'm going to enter into an agreement with this food and this sugar that you're gonna be my substance. Great. And then you develop the habit of overeating at the end of the day, eating your sugar, having your moment, and that's what makes you feel full. The problem is this feeds candida. And now, unknowingly, you've also entered into a covenant with this entity, as I like to call it. Candida becomes a problem. The yeast overgrows in your system, and suddenly you need more and more and more. And as this candida grows, ironically, what is one of the symptoms it produces? Scatterbrain. Now you, in turn, become not present. You're scattered. You're all over the place, and you're in this covenant and this exchange with this food and this entity and this candida and this sugar in an effort to make yourself feel full. So this is the deeper reason behind why a lot of people have candida. This is certainly what happened with me, why I developed candida, and I realized it all had to do with the fact that I was not receiving the fullness and the connection I needed at home from the relationships I grew up with. So I entered into that exchange with sugar, and the candida grew from there. And the crazy irony about this whole thing is when I go home and when I visit my family and when I see their lack of presence and how they're all over the place, I look around and I'm like, wow, this is candida. This literally is the spirit and is the entity of candida. It's just a way to avoid. If you have been struggling with candida and you know you have a problem, you know you have an overgrowth, maybe you have some of the symptoms I'm talking about, perhaps another perspective you could consider and look at is that you did not feel full from your mom and dad growing up, and they just weren't present. So you developed an addiction to food, and that led to candida overgrowth. Best advice, find ways to fuel yourself and find true substance without food. This can be through relationships. This can be through working a job you actually love, taking on work that's actually fulfilling to you. Stop lying to yourself about, oh, I just need the money, I need the money, and doing jobs you hate. That is gonna make you have to supplement with food at the end of the day. So if you're out there and you're struggling with candida, I totally get it. I completely empathize. I went through a really rough time with overeating and overindulging and never feeling full, and it caused a lot of issues in me physically and also caused me to be scattered, which ironically is the exact type of generational curse in my family that I'm trying to break. So I had to find other ways to get that substance, get that fulfillment through good friends, good relationships, a career that I love, and I am hoping that this video helps you do the same. Thanks guys, I hope that this was helpful. If you liked this message, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell for more.